Hey everybody, welcome to week number 9. I hope that you guys had a great spring break. I hope that you guys had the opportunity to refresh and recharge a little bit, that you got to take some time and enjoy yourselves. I hope that was a good break for you. I would like to say that I am sorry I am not with you tonight. So the EBSC spring break is different than the Ivy Tech break this year. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. And so, of course, this time I was, I am out of town. And my original plan was to actually just continue doing our, virtual meets, do a live class with you. But, it was just, I was a little worried I was going to be down there and then I wouldn't get any, good signal. And so here you guys were looking for me and I wasn't able to get on. It was just going to be a wasted time. So I figured that probably the best thing to do then was just to go ahead and get a video put together for you, so that you'll be able to watch this and do the assignments for tonight. Because I didn't want to throw the class completely off for you, because we do have some things to get into to keep ourselves on schedule. We can start with some housekeeping notes. First off, we are going to be allowed back on campus, and I'm sure that you've got some emails on that. This would have actually been our first night together back on campus, but because I'm not, here this time, we'll have to put that off for another week. But next week we will be together on campus. And then from there, we'll have a schedule of meeting times where we'll meet live and then we will do virtual classes. The idea is still that we will spend roughly half the time together live and half the time virtual. They do want us to continue doing that blended mode. So we will set up a schedule and we will do that for you. So we will be able to work that out and we'll be able to talk more about that. But this week obviously is a virtual class with the video here, and then the following week, and that will be a live week 10, and that will be live in person on campus. And I can't wait to see all of you for that. We are in room 119. If you are not familiar with that, or if you don't see that on syllabus, because of course this will be our first time together, we will be in room 119, okay? And we will start right at 6 o'clock as normal. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get into what we've got for tonight. If you go into the modules and you see our modules, which I have pulled up here on the screen for you. So tonight we're going to talk about comparative analysis. That is where we will begin. You will see, as I have before, I put together the notes in 3 different formats: the PowerPoint, the PDF, and then the Google Drive version. And I will be using the Google Drive version to present. Our assignment that you have for tonight, the comparative analysis commercial samples, we'll talk about that at the end. You will do that one tonight. And that will count as your attendance credit. And then this is the assignment that we will be working on starting next week. But I wanted to go ahead and throw this at you so that you can start doing some of the readings over the week and be prepared for next week. So let's go ahead. Let's jump right into the comparative analysis. And let me pull this up here for you. All right. So comparative analysis. This is our next big assignment that we're going to be looking at. And, the thing about the comparative analysis, you're going to see this a lot moving forward. And again, like I've said, I like to give you some sort of sense of how this will be used, how you will see this in some of your other classes. And so what I think really you're probably more familiar with the compare and contrast, and this is very similar. This is basically the same thing, right? The compare and contrast, we've talked a little bit about this before. There's 3 major elements, right? There is the compare, how are they the same? The contrast, how are they different? And then the third part, this is where we really get into it here, is the analysis. The why is it important? Why is it significant that there is that difference between them? So in your other classes, when you are in some of your major classes and you're doing some of your core work, you're going to see this kind of assignment come up a lot. And it won't be called a comparative analysis necessarily. It may be called an analysis, but a lot of times you're going to be asked to look at 2 things or 3 things, whatever, right? And it asks you to make a judgment on which one is better. which one is most appropriate, which one is the best course of action for this particular situation, right? And so you're going to have to kind of look at how they're the same, how they're different, how they apply to the particular situation. And then through that, you're going to analyze what the best course of action is. So it may be like you have a patient that presents with these symptoms. Here's one course of action. Here's another course of action. Which do you do? Maybe it is you get 2 court cases. And it's like, which one of these it would be the best precedence for the case that you're working on now? So you're going to see these comparative analysis in some different settings, but the key of it will be that analysis so that you can apply it to that particular situation. So let's go ahead and let's start in on this. What is the purpose? The purpose: contrast, draw out the differences between 2 subjects. How are they unlike each other, right? What are the differences? What are the dissimilarities? How do they go at the same topic in different ways, right? Now, that might be a pro and a con, okay? They might be both on the same side, but they're taking different angles at it. They're different approaches at getting to that answer. Comparisons, that's the opposite. How are they similar? Okay, how are they? We look at what they both do the same way, right? We want to be able to show where they overlap, okay? And then demonstrate how one is superior to the other in some way. And this is that analysis part. This is where you're going to, in a lot of your classes, which one is the best approach, which one is the most significant course of action, which one is the best for whatever situation you're looking at. We're also looking at demonstrating how 2 objects which appear dissimilar probably are very similar. And you're going to see this sometimes where the teacher, the employer, the whatever, and they're like, here's what's going on. I think it's just like this other situation we had. And your job then will be to, okay, are they? And then is that a good comparison to be using, right? And then these are really, because this is not a persuasive, we're still doing informative writing. These are not judgmental, they're not editorial, they're not biased, they're not persuasive, do this one over that one. It's more informational, because you're taking them piece by piece, you're taking a really solid look at them, and then you're trying to come up with a really good, analytical, unbiased, informative look at them. Okay, so let's talk about how to prepare for this. So how do you go about writing the comparative analysis? Well, the first thing I think is you need to brainstorm everything you can about these 2 subjects, okay? You want to be able to really look at them and pull as many things as you can out about them. Now, one of the things that you're going to have to do and be very conscious about doing is doing them equally, right? So if you look at one thing and you generate 6 points, when you look at the other one, you need to be able to do something very similar. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 7, but you want to do something that's very similar. If you only get 1 or 2 and the other's got 10 or 12, the problem then becomes is you're obviously biased toward the one. Okay, like if there's 12 things that you found about it that you want to address, that you really want to dig into, and the other one only has 2, you're obviously very biased, and that's not going to work for this for the analysis, because at that point you're not comparing apples and oranges, you're comparing apples and pigs, right? They're not even close to each other. So we do need to make sure that you're taking a very good, critical but equal look at the 2. The best case scenario is that you do these separately, right? That you do one, and then maybe you build in some time, and then you can look at the other, right? If you're going 1 and then 1 and then 1 and then 1, you end up starting to do that same thing, especially if you're doing text A and then text B, then text A, then text B, right? You're always comparing B to A, but you're never comparing A to B. And I know that's the semantic thing, but you're always starting and giving more emphasis on one. So the best case scenario is that you do them separately. Step number 2, let's find the points that are relevant to both subjects, okay? Now, what that means then is if we're going to compare things, we need to find things that we can do for both. Now, there are going to be differences, there are going to be similarities, that's okay, but they're the same thing we can look at both of them, okay? For instance, a house versus an apartment, right? Okay, so they're both places to live. They both have a certain cost. Both have certain advantages and disadvantages. And so those are things that we can look at together, right? You don't want to get to something where you've got 6 points, you can look at this one, but we don't have anything to compare it to on the other side, right? So you do want to make sure that whatever you're looking at, it is obvious that you can judge the other one with the same criteria. These points should be logical. They should be connected. We don't want it to be so painfully obvious that you're biased against one, that you have these like really crazy reaches of how they're connected. Step number 3, establish the dominant idea after examining points of similarities and differences. This is the basis of the compare and contrast. In other words, this is your focus. This is the thing you really want to hone in on, right? Now, are you going to address multiple points? Yeah, but you're really going to key in on what is the significant piece, the big question to look at. Number 4, we're going to select those traits to focus on based upon the dominant idea. So I did all this brainstorming. I generated this list of criteria. Then I said, this is the one big question that I want to focus on. So then I'm going to apply those questions to my text, to my videos, to my whatever I'm comparing, to bring out that main idea, right? Not all the traits are equal. Not all of them need to be discussed in the same way. And that is, I think that you don't want to feel pressured into doing everything equally. Now, you do want to compare them equally, or you want to contrast them equally, right? But if you've got like 3 points that you want to look at on both sides, one of them gets 3 paragraphs and the other 2 get 1 each, that's okay. You don't have to give the same amount of space, but you have to give the same amount of fairness to both of them. And then number 5, be sure these traits are subject to the purpose and produce the outcome you are aiming for. That's just a big way of saying, you want to show this one big idea, right? Well, you've got to make sure that these traits will really show that, and they're not really a reach, right? That you're getting to that point, that you're making your point, but that it's a legitimate point that you're making. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's get into the dirt of this, of how to do this. First off, the thesis statement. We've said this before. It's the one-sentence statement of purpose, right? It's the one big idea that we're looking at. Not only does it preview the topic for the reader, but for the writer, it keeps you on track. So in other words, when you look at some points, some information, some sources that you want to bring in, if it doesn't support this thesis statement, then it's probably not necessary, right? For the audience, they're going to see what that thing is, that this is going to be, this paper is going to be dealing with, right? Is being focused on, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you give everything away in the first sentence, but you're definitely giving your reader a sense of where this is going and where it's coming from, okay? Things, and again, this is rehash. We've talked about this before. Things not to do with the thesis. Obviously, you don't want a thesis that just states the topic. There are similarities and differences between these two texts. No, because that's the obvious. We know that's what you're doing, right? Don't use the first person. Again, we are using that kind of third person, professional, expert viewpoint, okay? We don't want to use a lot of I on this. It's redundant, okay? Your name's at the top. We know that this is what you believe because your name is on this, right? And we know this paper was generated by you, so we definitely know that this is where you're coming from. We want to take that first person out. It's way too casual for this type of paper. Plus, also, we've talked about the fact that anytime you start introducing yourself into the thesis or into the paper, then it becomes much more a thing about you and less about the topic. Don't use words like hope. After reading this, you will understand why you're wrong. You want to make sure that you're setting the right tone, okay? And if you're using those kinds of hope or hate or whatever statements, you're really kind of drawing a line in the sand, and you're really saying, hey, look, this is how I feel about my task, not about the topic. And you're daring the reader to call you out on that. So definitely we want to make sure that we're keeping our thesis on that third person professional level. Okay. Again, this is rehashed, but I think it's good to do these things again and periodically touch on them. What are the 4 steps to creating the thesis? We start with the topic. What is the topic that we're dealing with? Okay. What is your position on it? Now, I think it is important that we see early on what you're going to focus on, what your position is that you're going to focus on. I don't think you have to give everything away right off the bat, right? But I think it's important for us to see like you're for this or you're against this early so that I can judge your information accordingly, right? If later on I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I thought they were against this, but now they're for it. All these things don't make any sense to me. So I think you want to make sure that you're very clear up front. The preview of the points, and this is where, I think your traditional high school 3 main points in your thesis, we're going to talk about point 1, point 2, point 3, where that comes in, okay. But I don't know if you have to do like the specific 3 points. Maybe you give like those big broad pieces that you're going to look at. That gives the audience some sense of where you're going, but you don't have to give everything away. I don't think I should read the thesis sentence and know everything that's going to be in your paper. Excuse me. And then finally, the context. This just kind of puts the paper in perspective and lets us know kind of what's important about this and why I should be concerned, or maybe a little bit of background so that I get where you're coming from on this paper. Now, I don't want to say it's cheating because it's not, but is a tool out there. If you Google search thesis generators, there are several out there that will do some of this work for you and ask you a series of questions very similar to these. And you just punch in your answers and it'll give you a thesis to work with. I don't think it's, a lot of times it's not copy and paste worthy, but I definitely think it's something to help you get started and give you some sort of footing to begin with. Let's take a look at some weak thesis statements. They're both somewhat alike and different. It doesn't, first off, that's kind of like when, your significant other says, hey, did you like dinner? And you're like, yeah, it's okay. Like, you got to take a position. And I think your audience needs to understand that position, right? Because if you don't do that, if you don't give us that direction, you don't give us that that lean one way or the other, there's not a lot of purpose. And then you're forcing the reader to do all the work. You're forcing the reader to do all the thinking, right? You want to avoid unclear. Like I could see some similarities and some differences too. Again, that's very, it kind of sounds indifferent. But, what makes this unclear is the fact that we don't really know what we're talking about, right? Like you haven't brought anything in so we know what we're dealing with and why we're dealing with it. You want to avoid the single focuses. Both of them involve the single, both of these have the same thing. Both of these do the same thing. And we don't talk about the other side. We don't talk about the significance or whatever, right? So we want to make sure that our thesis statements kind of avoid this weak statement that forces the reader to do a lot of the work. How about some strong thesis statements? And again, these are, I think that the problem with looking at some statements like this are that if you're not familiar with the context, maybe like you don't understand how they are good. The first one comes from Lord of the Flies. It's a story about a group of boys that is shipwrecked, or they crash land on an island. And then they're forced to kind of fend for themselves, and they create this society, and then the society breaks apart, and then it's one faction versus the other. There's 2 different warring camps, if you will, one headed by Ralph and one headed by Jack. So the thesis statement, Ralph and Jack have very different leadership styles and motivations, which leads to the eventual chaos and anarchy on the island. Okay, so we get to see then what is this paper going to be about? Well, okay, we're going to talk about how these 2 had different leadership styles, how both of them looked at the way to lead their respective teams, if you will, their communities in different ways. And then what was the outcome of that? Like they did these things. What happened next, right? In order to make a decision between the Honda Civic and the BMW, consider the following criteria, including price, average mileage, and price of the insurance, right? And again, what this one shows us is that, hey, look, we're going to take these two and we're going to look at some of these criteria to help you make a better decision. So these are stronger thesis statements that really help the reader kind of visualize what the paper will be about. There are a couple different ways of organizing the comparative analysis. And I really kind of, I want to caution you on this a little bit. You do have to have a structure. You have to have a structure. And you really want to use one or the other of these. You don't want to be bouncing around. You don't want to be trying to do both, because what happens then is your paper starts to get unorganized. It starts to feel really random and it's hard to follow. So I think you have to be very clear on how you're going to approach the paper, right? The two ways, first off, is the block. So I do one and then I do the other, okay? So I want to deal all of Ralph, and then I want to do all of Jack, and then I can get to what it led to, right? If you do this, okay, and it says here, if you have a short essay, this might be the best approach, okay? If you're writing something shorter, a page, maybe two, this is probably a better approach. I'm not saying it has to be, but it's just something to be thinking about in something shorter. Now, if you do this, I think that you have to be very cognizant of the fact that you want to deal with all of this one thing first before you move on, because once you move on, you don't really want to go back, right? So you have to be very kind of clear and organized and thought out of what you want to do. The alternating, it goes point by point, or each element, each criteria, each thing individually that we want to look at on both of them, right? And so instead of the subject and then the subject, it's what do I want to look at subject A and then on subject B. And then here's what I want to look at on subject A and then subject B. And here's what I want to look at on subject A and subject B. This is better for a longer essay, because in a shorter essay, you're going to have these like rather short paragraphs, and then it's like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it kind of feels like a ping pong match a little bit. To kind of give you a sense of what that would look like, this might be a way to do the block, in which I have the BMW. I'm going to talk about, the BMW price, the BMW mileage, and the BMW insurance. And then I want to talk about those three things with the Honda Civic. So I want to deal with all of the BMW first and then all the Civic. Now, I could also go down. I could talk about price, and then I could talk about mileage, and then I could talk about insurance, right? But you want to be kind of careful, because that's going to seem like it's bouncing back and forth, right? The other one then is that alternative, or the alternating one. And this is where you want to deal with the points. So instead of like, here's all the Honda, and then here's all the BMW, you want to do, here's all the price, here's all the mileage, and here's all the insurance. You want to set this up for the best approach to get your message across to the audience. So you want to really think this through, right? All right, now let's talk about some indicators and some things that really kind of put the bow on the top of this, right? First off, good comparison essays feature the use of indicator words to convey to the reader at any given moment whether we're comparing or contrasting. And what that means is that, again, we don't want the audience to guess of what we're doing. We don't want the audience to be lost or confused, right? We want them to know, okay, we're looking at how these are the same. We're looking at these two things and where they overlap. Okay, now we're looking at these two things and how they're different, right? And so you want to make sure that the word choice you use helps reflect that, okay? So what do we have? And again, I don't think this is an all-inclusive list. These are just some things to be thinking about. If I'm comparing things, it's also in the same way, and similarity, right? They're equally do this, right? Or addition to. We want to give the audience a sense that we're looking at the way they are the same. Now, if I'm looking at the differences, how they are separate from each other, Although, however, on the other hand, right? And again, these are subtle things, but we want to make sure the reader knows very clearly where we're coming from and what we're doing. Some tips. So as you approach this, as you tackle this paper, some things to think about, okay? Some things to think about. Well, first off, you want to do them equally, okay? Now, it's not going to be exact word for word, sentence for sentence, but your reader really wants to get the sense that you gave both sides a fair shake, okay? If you don't, first off, it's going to be obvious your bias, but then the reader's going to think like, well, wait a minute, you didn't really spend any time on the second thing. Is there something you're hiding? Are you tricking me? Are you maybe trying to cover something up, right? And so when the reader feels like you're not being fair, okay, they're going to question your motivation. They're going to question why it wasn't done fairly. Another tip, be sure to discuss the same elements for each subject. Don't discuss one for one subject and not do it for the other. Again, that's that fairness idea. But again, it's also that, well, what are you hiding? What are you not saying? Okay. And really, you know, this is a subconscious thing for the reader. They're going to get a sense of something's not right. Okay. It's not so much that they're looking, they may not be actively going out searching like, what did they do? What did they do? What did they do? But they're going to get that sense. They're going to get that feeling. And that's going to break down that trust. And again, we've talked about that before. You only get one chance to lose your reader's trust, right? You want to maintain that trust no matter what. One way to do it is make sure that you are coming across as fair and as equitable as you can. Obviously, plan this out. Understand in advance which approach will be best for your paper, which will be the best for your subject. Do you want to do it block? Do you want to do an alternative? Again, it doesn't really matter which one, as long as you stick to it. And you do it in a way that you help the reader understand your point. I cannot stress this enough. You really have to have a goal in mind, right? There needs to be a purpose. In the end, the reader needs to see, why did I just read this? Okay, why did I just go through this? You want to be able to really pull something out. And when you do that, okay, when you're really doing that, what that's going to do for your reader, okay, is that first off, they're going to trust you more. They're going to trust you more, right? But then they're going to get a sense of value, right? And if they think that they're getting something of value, they're going to be a little bit more apt to believe you, but they're going to be more apt to really follow along with you, right? If they feel like this is just going in big circles, or it's not doing anything, or the points you're looking at are really like meaningless, there's not a lot of depth to them, okay, then they're going to turn off. They're going to try to tune you out. Okay, what are some things to look for? And I think that every situation is different. I think every situation is different. Every time that we tackle this, you will come up with different things that you have to look for. Now, in some of your classes, it may be very spelled out for you. Look for this and this. Others, it's going to be kind of left up to you. So you're going to try to find the things that really help you get this across to your audience. What kinds of things might we look for? First off, are ideas and content. What do they say? What points do they deal with? What areas do they cover? What ideas, what definitions, what concepts, right? This really gets to like this global message, the types of things that they provided for you. I think really, really important thing is, what examples did they use? Now, remember, a writer picks examples for a particular reason, right? They use certain examples to get things across to you, to sell it a certain way, to make you see it or feel it a certain way, right? So when they pull up these examples and they use these examples, you really want to be looking at and asking yourself that question, well, why do they use this? What does this example say about them or their position or what they're thinking or how they're trying to sell it to me? And we're going to get into a lot of these. We're going to look at commercials and we're going to be looking at some textual pieces. And we're really going to want to look at those examples. Tone, that is the author's feeling toward the topic. And we want to try to get a sense of where is the author coming from. Are they like really into it? Are they really excited? Are they really angry? Are they, what is it that they are saying, right? And we're going to get that through the word choice that they use, which is the next point. But we're going to get it by, the examples, which is right there. But we're also going to try to get that sense of, how emphatic were they? How enthusiastic were they about this? And then obviously the wording, the types of word they use. The example I used, the example I've used before is like, which would you rather be, murdered or killed? And, obviously both of them end up in your death, but, murder implies that somebody did something heinous to you, right? Where killed could be accidental, it could be, any number of things that have happened to you, right? It's not so, it doesn't necessarily have to be, nefarious and vicious and pre-planned, right? So, the wording is important, and the author uses words on purpose, and you have to assume that the author wanted the reader to see these particular words, and they do carry meaning. Are there images? Now, we're going to be looking at, and our first comparative that we're going to try to work on is visuals with commercials. And we want to we'll be looking at those, but what images were they, what images did they use? Now maybe it's colors, maybe it's just style or lighting, maybe it's the video clips that they use. What was it that really made, visually made this stand out, right? Verbal and nonverbal cues. What kinds, again, if this would be like a video or some sort of live performance, right? How does the body language, what did it sound like? How did they talk? And, we really think about that delivery. This really gets into that delivery. Somebody who's excited about something will talk faster, their voice will go up a little bit. They might sound different. If they're not enthusiastic about it, or if they don't like the topic, they're going to be slower. Maybe they're going to be a little downcast, right? A little softer. They're not going to use as many examples. It's going to feel like they're just checking a box or whatever. And so those delivery kinds of things are going to be some things that we really want to look for. Okay. The context, what background do they provide us, and how do they build those connections with us? Do we see the writer's bias? Do we see that they obviously are leaning one way or another, that they obviously are in favor of one? Now, I don't know if that really is, we all have a bias, and we all are going to come at this when we're doing a comparison. We're all going to have one that stands out above the other, right? But does that bias come across in a way that makes you think that they're not being fair? What was the intended audience? Maybe it's the intended audience. Maybe it was like, you think about, well, this is a topic that is really high end, but they wrote it for, the average person instead of academia or something like that. Does that say something? Or maybe that's a way that we kind of differentiate the two. And then the implied versus the stated message or the purpose. They said they did this, but did they do that, right? They maybe it was like they said one thing, but I kind of got a sense that they were trying to do something else. Or maybe it's both, right? But what were they trying to accomplish with this? Okay. Now, again, I think that we're going to be this is the first step, the comparing and the contrasting. That's the first step of this analysis, where we're trying to find the overlap, or we're trying to find the differences. That's that first step. We're doing that first type of analysis where we're really trying to pick apart a message and try to really look at it in a very critical kind of way. Okay. So I hope that you have a sense of that. I hope that you got a sense of what's going on and how these things are going to look. Let me give you a sense of where this is going. This is the assignment for the comparative analysis essay that will be due in 3 weeks that we're really going to be focusing on. I think might even be 4 weeks, really. I have to look at the date. I think it's 4 weeks. But the comparative analysis is a critical look at different materials, makes judgments, not just on their similarities and differences, but also why it matters. It is the analytical element that's the most important and the key to this, right? So you're going to produce a paper that starts off with our attention getter. We get a sense of who the authors are and what you're talking about with the thesis. We're going to get a summary of each of the 2 texts, and then you're going to compare, contrast, and then you're going to analyze these, right? Now, this is the basic outline. We're going to look more at those later, but here's the part I want you to see more of here. So you're going to pick 2 of these texts to analyze. So the whole idea behind this, well, I'm giving you the theme. I'm giving you the theme to deal with. If you feel like there's a better text that you really want to jump on, I'm okay with that. But I think we really want to talk about how and why you might want to use one of those over the other. But these are the ones that I'm going to give you to pick from. These have to do with food and the role they play in our society. Maybe it's our diet, maybe it's our health, maybe, what role does food play? I want you to read 2 of these, okay? Now, I don't expect you to have read all of these for next week, okay? I'm just pointing this out to you now so that you know where they're at and what's going on. I would suggest that between now and next week, you go through and you skim through these. I would suggest that you get a sense of what each one's about. You can look them up. There's summaries of them. I have PDF versions of all of them, so this will open up. I believe they're all PDF versions where you open them up and you'll be able to read them. They are all roughly the same length. None of them really jump out over the others. I think it's you might want to note that the last 3 come out of magazines. These were written. They were originally written for magazines, and so they have a different feel to them. Especially the 2 from the Atlantic will feel a little bit different because you can tell that they were written particularly for publication that way. I did include these 3 background readings, and these are some nice things to help you understand the concepts above, right? These are not ones to use for your comparative analysis, but they are there to help you understand it. And it would not be a bad idea to read these first, or definitely read these over the course of the next week, because again, they will build that context so you understand what the other ones are trying to get at. Okay. Now, again, you don't have to do anything with this, but I just want you to see this is where we're going, and the things we're going to do next week and the week after, they're going to kind of help build the skills that you need to be able to take these texts and really compare them analytically. So let's look at the assignment for tonight. This is the one I want you to do tonight. This is what I would like you to do. We will use these next week, okay? So the pieces that we gather tonight, we're going to take and we're going to build on, and we're going to use them for next week. Now, if we were going to be in class tonight, I would give you some examples. I would walk you through some of these, and then I would turn you loose and have you find some of your own examples. We're going to kind of reverse that a little bit. What's going to happen is I'm going to have you do this assignment tonight, or this is going to be in the discussion board tonight. And again, this counts for your attendance. Then we'll be able to take that and use it next week. So we're going to kind of reverse the process. So now we have some samples to work with. All right, so I've got a little bit of information. The comparative analysis starts with taking 2 items and putting them side by side to compare and contrast them. The key, though, is to find common elements that we can look at together. If you don't have those common elements, like I said before, you can't really compare them, right? Now, even though they may seem wildly different, they may seem very different, okay? There's still places that we can touch on. And again, I don't want you to sense when we talk about how we look at them on these certain points, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same. It's a certain thing that we can look for in each of them, right? And this one has it and this one doesn't, okay? And then why is it important that they do or don't have those things? I do have a link to a video where I explain this a little bit. It's very similar to the slides that we just talked about. There are other slides. This is an older video that I've done, but it is there for you, and you are welcome to watch it. It's about 6 minutes long, if I remember right. It's like 6 minutes long, and you are welcome to use that. It'll give you another sense of what we're talking about. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go find 3 commercials for different products of the same class, okay? What does that mean? 3 sodas, 3 clothing stores, 3 car companies, 3 hotels, 3 websites, 3 whatever, okay? I want you to be able to find, and again, that's going to help us kind of create that similarity so we can look at them on the same level, right? But I want you to find 3 things in the same category, but different brands. They have to be different brands. If you had like 3 different Cheeto ads, for instance, they're all going to be the same. It'll be a little different content, right? It'll be different content, but the message will be the same. The styles will be similar probably, unless they're like from different eras. There won't be a lot of differences there, and we won't really be able to compare and contrast them. So you want to make sure that you're using different same category, different brands, okay? And then we're going to be able to look for those common messages, themes, images, and devices. I would suggest that you go to YouTube. That is the best place to do them. I know last semester we did this. Someone did like compare and contrast commercials. You might find something that way. The examples they brought back were definitely different, but they weren't from the same, different brands in the same category, and so it didn't really work. Most of those examples that you're going to find like that, they look at like 3 commercials that use this device, right? Instead of looking at, by product. So you are welcome to do that, and it will definitely give you some thoughts and some ways to look at things, but it may not be the best approach for this. YouTube is probably the best place to look for these, although I would not be opposed to you doing a Google search or some other searching to help you find those things. What you're going to do in a new post, you're going to copy and link these, copy and paste these links in a new post. Label them so we know what they are, okay? Label them so we know what they are. And then with them, I want you to give a couple sentences that give some sort of information about it. Like, why did you pick this? What is relevant about it? Why do you think this would be a good commercial to use for this, okay? The examples that I have here, if I were to be doing this, and of course I have 4 instead of 3, but that's okay. I've got sodas. So I pulled, you can't use these, okay? You can't use these here. I have the Pepsi Generation Now and Then with Britney Spears. I have a commercial with Elton John, one with Nancy Sinatra. Notice I go Pepsi, Diet Coke, RC, and then of course I'm going to use the Capital One commercial with Taylor Swift, okay? And these things rotate on different levels. I have 3 sodas from different singers, but then if I pull in this 4th, I have 4 commercials with singers, and I know that's a little different, but I'll show you when we get into this. Is a little different than what I want you to do. But once we get talking about next week, we'll be able to look at these on some different levels, right? Then I put here, these commercials all feature popular singers. Every one of them sings their own songs except for Britney. In this case, they all try to connect with a sense of nostalgia, what it's like to be with the stars. All of them are fun and lighthearted. We can look at these in a lot of different ways, and that's what we're going to do next week, okay? So here's what I want. First off, If you have any questions after you watch this, please email me. Please drop me an email. Say, hey, here's what I'm having some trouble with this. I don't understand this, or I need some help with this, and we will try to get you that as quickly as possible. I will be out of town Tuesday night, so I may not be able to answer these questions specifically Tuesday night. But as soon as I can get back to a computer, I will answer these for you as quickly as I can. Okay. Obviously, we're at the end of the video, so I'm hoping that you have watched the video and you've taken some notes and you've gotten some ideas about what we're doing. Okay. Tonight, I want you to, in a new post, you're going to put these 3 commercials, same product class, different brands. Okay. 3 commercials. You're going to copy and paste the links with them. You're going to label them what they are, and then a little bit about them so we know what we're kind of getting with them. Okay. That's going to be tonight. Between tonight and next week, then what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at those articles on the comparative analysis assignment and start going through there, start looking at them, start reviewing them a little bit, kind of skim through them, get a sense of what they are. So when it's time to make a choice, you've got a kind of an educated guess, right? You're not just picking blindly. You have a reason for picking one versus another. Again, I'm sorry that I was not here with you tonight. It was not my intention, but this just kind of came up and it wasn't, took the opportunity while I could. And especially because this was like the first night we would all be back together, right? And that's what I really wanted. We will, again, meet together next week in room 119. Okay. So we will be back together next week. And at that time, we'll also set up a schedule of what the rest of the semester will look like in terms of in-person learning versus blended learning or online virtual learning, like what we have done up to this point. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. Please let me know what I can do to help you get you through that. I will answer those as quickly as I can. I hope you have a great night tonight. You enjoy the assignment because I think this can kind of be fun. Looking up these commercials and stuff, and that we're going to have some fun with it next week. Okay. So I'm super excited about that. And I tell you, again, I know this isn't the best situation for everybody. I'm glad that we've got to the point where we can be back on campus. And that's going to turn some things around, I think. I hope that we can continue that with the rest of the semester. You have anything, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.